They had laughed at humanity once. The great empires of the galaxy had looked down from their gleaming thrones and decided the people of Earth were too primitive to matter. To them, humans were little more than children with toys made of fire and steel, stumbling across the stars with outdated ships and fragile dreams. They measured power in fleets the size of moons and weapons that could erase continents. By those standards, humanity was irrelevant. But they had made one mistake, one flaw in their judgment that history would never forget. They underestimated what humans could build when they were cornered. It began as a whisper across the trade routes, a rumor no one wanted to believe. A patrol fleet from the Orion Dominion had gone silent. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. Entire squadrons vanished into empty space. At first, the Empire assumed it was a rebellion or an internal failure, but then other fleets began reporting the same thing. Battles that should have lasted minutes were ending in seconds. Warships engineered over centuries, crafted with precision beyond human comprehension, were being destroyed in ways no one could explain. Weapons failed without warning, shields collapsed, and crews swore they saw the impossible. Human ships moving faster than physics should allow. In the great council chambers of the Empire, the elders dismissed it as lies. Humanity couldn't have created something new. Their technology was decades, even centuries behind the rest of the galaxy. How could a people still fighting over their own planet have built anything that could frighten the stars? Yet evidence kept piling in. A fleet of 30 ships went to confront a single human vessel near the rim of explored space. Only the human ship returned. The Empire's fleets were proud, but fear had begun to gnaw at the edges of their confidence. And that was when they saw it for themselves. The first human warship that entered the Empire's space didn't match any known design. It wasn't graceful or adorned with the elegant structures of galactic architecture. It was black, angular, and alive with an energy no scanner could identify. It didn't shimmer like advanced alloys, nor did it radiate the cold precision of Empire design. Instead, it looked like something pulled from the nightmares of every admiral who gazed upon it. The hull bent light in strange ways as though the void itself wrapped around it. It moved without the familiar hum of engines, almost gliding like a predator through water. When the Empire's commanders ordered it to stand down, the ship responded with silence. Then, in less than a heartbeat, their fleet was gone. Not destroyed in the usual way, not burned or broken apart, but erased, snatched out of existence so quickly that no one could even record the moment. The human ship drifted forward, unscathed, and vanished back into the void. Panic spread faster than light. Scholars searched archives for clues. Scientists tore apart every known law of physics, desperate to find a way to explain what they had witnessed. Some whispered that humans had stumbled upon ancient technology, something hidden and forbidden. Others believed humanity had discovered a secret no civilization should hold, a weapon that bypassed matter itself. Whatever it was, it had turned the balance of the galaxy upside down. Yet the strangest part was not the power of this technology, but the way humans wielded it. They did not conquer planets or demand tribute. They struck only when provoked, vanishing just as quickly as they appeared. Empires that had once ignored Earth now feared to even speak its name aloud. What if humans were not simply defending themselves? What if they had a greater plan, something the galaxy wasn't ready to face? Behind closed doors, the Empire's rulers argued. Should they crush humanity before this weapon spread? Could they even crush it? Every simulation ended in disaster. Every plan collapsed under the weight of the unknown. A few bold voices urged diplomacy, warning that war with humanity might mean the end of the Empire itself. But others, driven by pride, demanded blood, and in the middle of this storm stood the humans themselves. No one knew what they were truly building. No one knew the limits of this technology. Was it a ship, a weapon, or something beyond comprehension? The galaxy had always believed it understood power. Numbers, weapons, empires built on fear. But humans had changed the very meaning of it. They weren't just powerful, they were unpredictable. Imagine the terror of generals who had studied war their entire lives, suddenly realizing that everything they knew was useless. Imagine the pride of a species long mocked and dismissed, finally standing tall before the greatest empires in existence. For the first time in galactic history, the old powers were afraid of a people they had once considered weak. But here is the question that no one can answer. What do the humans want? Are they building toward peace, a balance that will protect them from annihilation? Or are they preparing for something far darker, something that will shake the foundations of every star system in existence? The Empire has no answer. The galaxy waits in silence, holding its breath, as humanity steps forward with technology not just powerful, but unimaginable. And as the Council gathered one last time, their voices low and unsteady, a new signal arrived. A human transmission, clear and direct, cutting through every barrier. It was not a declaration of war. It was not a plea for peace. It was something else, something that left even the most powerful rulers trembling. The words were simple. The meaning terrifying, and that, my friends, is where our story truly begins. The words of the human transmission echoed in every chamber of the Empire's ruling council. Simple, direct, and spoken without hesitation. Do not follow us. That was all. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet those 3 words were heavier than the collapse of a star. No threat, no explanation. Just a warning. It was not the kind of message the galaxy was used to hearing. Other civilizations had always spoken with grandeur, filling the void with boasts or long declarations. But this was different. It was cold, it was final, and it was terrifying, because behind those words was the unshakable confidence of a species that no longer feared anyone. The Empire's leaders tried to maintain control, but the truth was slipping through their fingers. Whispers spread through every sector. Merchants muttered about ships that never returned. Miners swore they saw human vessels appear in empty space without a sound, watching them before disappearing again. Refugees claimed entire fleets had been swallowed by the void, leaving nothing but silence. And always, there was that same message. Do not follow us. But how had humanity reached this point? Just a century ago, Earth had been a divided world, its people struggling with war, pollution, and fragile alliances. Even after they broke into the stars, their first ships were clumsy compared to the elegance of galactic designs. They relied on engines that burned too hot, weapons that seemed crude, and strategies that looked reckless. Other empires laughed. Some pitied them. A few even tried to protect them, thinking humanity too fragile to survive. What no one understood was that humans carried something more dangerous than advanced ships or powerful weapons. They carried desperation. They carried the hunger of a species that had learned survival through constant struggle. While empires grew complacent with their ancient power, humans learned to innovate under pressure. They failed often, but every failure sharpened them. Every mistake pushed them further. Where others sought comfort, humans sought challenge. The breakthrough that changed everything came not from a mighty government or a grand empire, but from hidden labs scattered across Earth and its colonies. For years, scientists whispered of limits that should not be crossed, limits of energy, of speed, of matter itself. But humans had never cared much for limits. They bent rules until they broke, and then they built something new from the fragments. At first it was small, a weapon that didn't need ammunition, a drive that moved ships without engines, shields that weren't shields at all, but distortions of reality itself. No single invention made sense, not in the way galactic science understood. But together they formed something terrifying, a new way of war. What frightened the Empire most wasn't the power of these creations. It was that no one could explain them. Engineers tore apart recordings of human battles, yet the data refused to align with known physics. Mathematicians broke their minds trying to understand equations that shouldn't even exist. Some whispered that humans had not discovered technology, but rewritten the very language of the universe. The mystery deepened with every encounter. Captured fragments of human ships dissolved when studied. Energy signatures faded like ghosts. Weapons melted into slag as if they refused to be reverse-engineered. It was as if the technology was alive, designed not only to fight, but to hide its secrets from anyone foolish enough to probe. The Empire grew paranoid. What if humans were no longer bound to material science at all? What if their technology wasn't just advanced, but fundamentally different, operating on laws the rest of the galaxy had never even considered? The thought was unbearable. It meant that all the power, all the fleets and weapons and traditions that had ruled the stars for millennia might now be meaningless. The Empire could not ignore the silence any longer. Every council session ended in shouting. Every plan fell apart under the same impossible truth. No one knew what humanity truly possessed. Pride demanded action, but fear whispered hesitation. In the end, desperation won. A mission was authorized. Not an open strike, but a shadow effort. A probe into the heart of human space. If humanity's technology could not be destroyed in battle, then perhaps it could be stolen. The fleet chosen was small but elite, commanded by one of the Empire's most cunning admirals. He carried with him not just ships, but spies, scientists, and codebreakers. Their task was clear: penetrate human borders, observe, infiltrate, and bring back whatever knowledge they could find. For the first time in centuries, the Empire acted not as conquerors, but as thieves. The fleet slipped into the edge of human territory, expecting resistance. But what they found was worse. Nothing. No ships, no transmissions, no signs of life. The systems they passed seemed empty, quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Planets were dark, satellites missing. It was as if humanity had vanished into the shadows. Yet here and there, the fleet glimpsed something. A pulse of energy from a dead moon, a flicker of movement on the edge of a gas giant. Always distant, always out of reach. The humans were watching, but never showing themselves. The Admiral pressed on, his confidence slowly eroding. His spies reported strange disturbances in their systems. Phantom signals, false coordinates, data that rewrote itself without warning. At first, they blamed errors in their own equipment, but the pattern was too precise. It was control. The humans weren't just observing them. They were inside their systems, turning their own tools against them. Still, the fleet found what it came for, or so it seemed. On the surface of a frozen planet, deep beneath the ice, they uncovered what looked like a human facility. Not military, but scientific. Strange towers of black metal pierced the cavern walls, humming with energy that scanners couldn't classify. The scientists were thrilled, certain this was the breakthrough they had been sent to capture. But as they began their work, unease grew. The machines weren't abandoned. They were active, and the deeper they looked, the less sense anything made. Circuits weren't circuits. Engines weren't engines. It was like staring at a puzzle with no edges, where every piece changed shape the moment it was touched. Then the dreams began. Crew members woke screaming, swearing they saw human faces in their sleep, faces that whispered warnings or watched them silently with unblinking eyes. Some claimed the facility itself was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Others heard voices through their comms, not words but echoes of their own thoughts repeated back at them. Fear spread quickly. The Admiral tried to maintain order, but discipline cracked under the weight of the unknown. Back in the Empire, news of the mission was tightly controlled, but rumors slipped through anyway. The Council debated endlessly, divided between those who believed humanity had unlocked something beyond science and those who insisted it was all a trick designed to spread fear. Merchants refused to travel near human borders. Colonists abandoned settlements close to Earth's reach. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's people began to doubt their rulers' ability to keep them safe. Amid this growing chaos, another story unfolded far from the council chambers. In the outer colonies of the Empire, whispers of rebellion began to spread. Small worlds long oppressed by the Empire's rule started to speak of humanity with reverence, painting them as liberators. "They are building something greater," the rebels said. "They do not conquer, but they cannot be conquered. They are the proof that the Empire is not eternal." To the rulers, this was more dangerous than the technology itself. Humanity wasn't just a threat to their fleets. It was becoming an idea, a symbol of defiance that could ignite the stars. Meanwhile, deep within the hidden facility, the Empire's infiltration team pushed further. Their scientists, desperate for answers, activated one of the black towers. The reaction was instant and terrifying. Lights filled the cavern, bending in patterns that twisted perception. Gravity shifted. Time itself seemed to slow. And then, for the briefest moment, they saw something. An image not of machines, but of humans standing in impossible light, their forms blurred, their voices layered like echoes across eternity. The words they spoke were not clear, but the message was undeniable. It was another warning. The Empire could not ignore the silence any longer. Every council session ended in shouting. Every plan fell apart under the same impossible truth. No one knew what humanity truly possessed. Pride demanded action, but fear whispered hesitation. In the end, desperation won. A mission was authorized, not an open strike, but a shadow effort, a probe into the heart of human space. If humanity's technology could not be destroyed in battle, then perhaps it could be stolen. The fleet chosen was small but elite, commanded by one of the Empire's most cunning admirals. He carried with him not just ships, but spies, scientists, and code-breakers. Their task was clear: penetrate human borders, observe, infiltrate, and bring back whatever knowledge they could find. For the first time in centuries, the Empire acted not as conquerors, but as thieves. The fleet slipped into the edge of human territory, expecting resistance. But what they found was worse. Nothing. No ships, no transmissions, no signs of life. The systems they passed seemed empty, quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Planets were dark, satellites missing. It was as if humanity had vanished into the shadows. Yet here and there, the fleet glimpsed something, a pulse of energy from a dead moon, a flicker of movement on the edge of a gas giant. Always distant, always out of reach. The humans were watching, but never showing themselves. The Admiral pressed on, his confidence slowly eroding. His spies reported strange disturbances in their systems: phantom signals, false coordinates, data that rewrote itself without warning. At first, they blamed errors in their own equipment, but the pattern was too precise. It was control. The humans weren't just observing them, they were inside their systems, turning their own tools against them. Still, the fleet found what it came for, or so it seemed. On the surface of a frozen planet, deep beneath the ice, they uncovered what looked like a human facility. Not military, but scientific. Strange towers of black metal pierced the cavern walls, humming with energy that scanners couldn't classify. The scientists were thrilled, certain this was the breakthrough they had been sent to capture. But as they began their work, unease grew. The machines weren't abandoned. They were active, and the deeper they looked, the less sense anything made. Circuits weren't circuits. Engines weren't engines. It was like staring at a puzzle with no edges, where every piece changed shape the moment it was touched. Then the dreams began. Crew members woke screaming, swearing they saw human faces in their sleep, faces that whispered warnings or watched them silently with unblinking eyes. Some claimed the facility itself was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Others heard voices through their comms, not words, but echoes of their own thoughts repeated back at them. Fear spread quickly. The Admiral tried to maintain order, but discipline cracked under the weight of the unknown. Back in the Empire, news of the mission was tightly controlled, but rumors slipped through anyway. The Council debated endlessly, divided between those who believed humanity had unlocked something beyond science, and those who insisted it was all a trick designed to spread fear. Merchants refused to travel near human borders. Colonists abandoned settlements close to Earth's reach. For the first time in living memory, the Empire's people began to doubt their rulers' ability to keep them safe. Amid this growing chaos, another story unfolded far from the council chambers. In the outer colonies of the Empire, whispers of rebellion began to spread. Small worlds long oppressed by the Empire's rule started to speak of humanity with reverence, painting them as liberators. "They are building something greater," the rebels said. "They do not conquer, but they cannot be conquered. They are the proof that the Empire is not eternal." To the rulers, this was more dangerous than the technology itself. Humanity wasn't just a threat to their fleets. It was becoming an idea, a symbol of defiance that could ignite the stars. Meanwhile, deep within the hidden facility, the Empire's infiltration team pushed further. Their scientists, desperate for answers, activated one of the Black Towers. The reaction was instant and terrifying. Lights filled the cavern, bending in patterns that twisted perception. Gravity shifted. Time itself seemed to slow. And then, for the briefest moment, they saw something. An image not of machines, but of humans standing in impossible light, their forms blurred, their voices layered like echoes across eternity. The words they spoke were not clear, but the message was undeniable. It was another warning. The Admiral ordered an immediate withdrawal, but it was too late. The facility came alive. Machines that had appeared dormant unfolded into shapes beyond comprehension. Beams of light not made of energy or matter lashed out, touching ships without burning them, yet leaving them paralyzed. One by one, the Empire's vessels froze in space, their systems dead, their weapons useless. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The ships drifted free, unharmed, the facility once more silent. But the message was clear. Humanity had allowed them to live. It was not mercy. It was a choice. When the Admiral finally returned, broken and pale, he carried with him no stolen technology, no great secret, only fear. His testimony shook the Council. Humanity was not protecting technology with weapons. Humanity was protecting something greater, something no empire could yet understand. The conflict grew deeper with every passing day. Some rulers demanded a final war, insisting humanity must be crushed before their influence spread further. Others begged for diplomacy, warning that such a war could mean the end of everything. Yet even as they argued, one truth could not be ignored. The humans had not attacked. They had not invaded. They had simply drawn a line and said, "Do not follow us." And that defiance was enough to unravel the confidence of an empire that had once believed itself unshakable. On Earth itself, humanity remained silent. Ordinary citizens lived their lives, but behind closed doors, leaders and scientists prepared for something greater. They had built not just ships, but ideas that could not be stolen, defenses that could not be explained, and a power rooted in the very core of their history. The will to survive at any cost. And so the galaxy waited, torn between fear and hope, pride and desperation. Humanity stood in the shadows, their true intentions hidden, their technology unimaginable. The Empire stood on the edge of collapse, torn apart by fear of the unknown. And somewhere in the cold void between them, the first sparks of a greater storm were beginning to burn. No one knew what would come next. A war to end empires? An alliance to change the stars forever? Or something stranger still, something that would redefine not only power, but the very meaning of existence? The answer was coming. Humanity had seen to that. The Empire had always believed itself eternal. Its fleets had crushed rebellions, its technology had humbled rivals, its banners had flown above countless worlds. But now, in the shadow of humanity's rise, all that certainty was crumbling. Every council session grew more desperate, more divided, the rulers caught between fear and pride. They could not admit weakness, yet every report from the frontier whispered the same truth. Humanity had become the storm they could not control. The Admiral's testimony spread despite all efforts to silence it. Soldiers spoke of ships frozen in place without a shot fired. Colonists traded rumors of entire armadas turned to dust by weapons no one could describe. And always there was the same warning: do not follow us. But the Empire had already followed. They had trespassed into places they were never meant to reach, and now they feared the cost. Behind the closed doors of Earth's hidden councils, humanity debated as well. For the first time in history, the old nations had set aside their differences, unified by the simple truth that survival depended on unity. What they had built in secret was not just technology. It was a shield against extinction. They remembered too well the centuries of humiliation, the laughter of alien empires who saw them as weak. And they knew that this time they could not allow themselves to be underestimated again. Some leaders argued for silence, for holding their line and letting fear do the work of war. Others, more restless, whispered of striking first. The galaxy was fragile. The empire was divided. One decisive blow could shatter their dominance forever. But still, the debate continued. For all their power, humans understood the weight of the choice before them. To act recklessly would risk not just victory, but everything they had built. Meanwhile, in the far reaches of space, the Empire's secret efforts continued. Another mission was launched, this one larger, riskier, commanded not by an admiral but by the Council itself. Entire fleets were gathered, not to invade but to encircle. The plan was simple: trap a human vessel, disable it, and drag it back for study. To the rulers, this was the only path left. Understanding humanity's secret had become not just a matter of pride, but survival. The trap was laid near a dying star at the edge of the spiral arm. Dozens of warships waited, their weapons primed, their engines silent. Days passed in stillness, the void pressing heavy on the crews as they waited for the prey that might never come. Tension gnawed at discipline. Some whispered they were already being watched. Others swore they felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing against their thoughts. Then it happened. A single human vessel appeared out of nothing, as if it had always been there, cloaked in the folds of reality itself. It was not large, it did not bristle with weapons, yet its presence turned every breath shallow. The black hull seemed to drink the starlight, bending it into impossible shapes. No signal came, no hail, no warning. It simply drifted forward, silent and unyielding. The Empire's commanders gave the order. The net closed. Energy beams cut across the void, weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. And for a moment, it seemed to work. The human ship froze in place, wrapped in webs of force strong enough to shatter moons. Cheers erupted across the fleet. For the first time, they thought they had succeeded. But the silence that followed was worse than any battle. Systems began to fail without reason. Engines flickered out. Weapons shut down. Crews screamed as their consoles came alive with words not written by their own hands. "Do not follow us!" The warning pulsed across every screen, every channel, every mind. Over and over. Unrelenting. The more the Empire resisted, the stronger it became, until the message drowned out thought itself. Ships began to collide, spinning helplessly as their systems betrayed them. The net unraveled. And then, the human vessel moved. Not with force, not with fire, but with inevitability. It passed through the fleet like a shadow, untouched, unstoppable. Where it went, silence followed. And when it was gone, the Empire's greatest fleet floated powerless, stripped not of ships, but of will. The Council tried to hide the disaster, but news cannot be caged forever. The people of the Empire, once loyal, began to question. If humanity could paralyze their mightiest fleets without firing a single shot, what hope remained? Whispers turned to unrest, unrest to riots. And in the chaos, the old colonies, long oppressed, saw their chance. They spoke of humanity as a spark, a promise of freedom. The Empire's strength, once absolute, now became its prison. Yet even as the Empire faltered, the humans did not advance. They did not seize territory. They did not strike the wounded enemy. Instead, they waited, always watching from the edges, their intentions still hidden. To some, this restraint was more terrifying than any war. If humanity did not want conquest, then what did they want? What were they preparing for? Among the Empire's scholars, a new theory began to take root. Humanity's technology was not just advanced, it was alien in its own right. Not stolen, not invented, but discovered. Perhaps they had uncovered relics older than the galaxy, knowledge left behind by civilizations long vanished. If so, then humanity might not be acting alone. Perhaps they were merely the messengers of something greater. Perhaps the warning, "Do not follow us," was not only about Earth, but about something beyond, something waiting in the dark. The fear gave way to paranoia. Every shadow in the void became a threat, every silence a weapon. The Empire's leaders saw their power slipping, their authority questioned, their people restless. They had built their rule on the illusion of control, and humanity had shattered it without ever declaring war. And still, the humans prepared. In hidden stations orbiting dead worlds, in underground cities beneath scarred moons, they built quietly, methodically, as though guided by a timeline only they understood. Ships that bent space like cloth. Engines that whispered through the void. Weapons never seen, never tested openly. To the galaxy, they remained shadows. To themselves, they were survivors, preparing for the storm they knew was coming. The climax of this growing tension drew near when the Empire, cornered and desperate, made a choice that would change everything. They gathered their last loyal fleets, summoned every commander still willing to fight, and plotted one final strike. Not to capture, not to study, but to destroy. They would launch everything they had left into the heart of human space, no matter the cost. The announcement shook the galaxy. Allies withdrew, colonies threatened to rebel, but pride blinded the Empire's rulers. They could not allow their legacy to end in fear. Humanity had warned them again and again. Humanity had given them the chance to step back. Now the Empire would answer, not with caution but with fire. And as the fleets prepared to move, as millions of soldiers steeled themselves for a war they did not understand, the galaxy itself held its breath. Humanity waited in silence, unseen, unknowable. The Empire burned with desperation, ready to gamble everything on a single throw. The moment was coming. The clash that would decide not only the fate of humanity and the Empire, but perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. And yet, in the quiet before that storm, one truth lingered, unspoken and undeniable. No matter how it ended, nothing would ever be the same again. The fleets of the Empire assembled, a final show of force meant to terrify not only humanity, but their own restless people. Thousands of ships gathered like a storm across the stars, a wall of steel and firepower unmatched in living memory. Entire worlds were emptied of their defenders to fill the ranks. Every weapon that could be fitted onto a ship was prepared. The Council proclaimed this would be their victory, that humanity's shadow would finally be torn apart by sheer might. Pride painted over fear, but beneath the surface, doubt still lingered. Even as soldiers prepared for war, the Empire's people questioned. Some asked why humanity, with all its strange power, had not already crushed them. Others whispered that perhaps humans were not enemies at all, but guardians of something hidden. Still others feared that provoking them further would unleash something far worse than war. But the Council did not care. They could not retreat now, not when their authority teetered on collapse. Victory, they believed, would restore order. The fleets moved, the stars blazing with their engines. For days, silence reigned. And then, just as the Armada reached the edges of human territory, everything changed. It began with the disappearance of an entire battle group. No distress call, no explosion, just gone. One moment they were visible on every scanner, the next, nothing. Panic rippled through the command channels. Was it a human weapon? A trap? No one knew. But before answers could come, a second battle group vanished. Then a third. Ships began firing wildly into the void, desperate to strike an enemy they could not see. And then came the message. Not from humanity, but from somewhere else. It bled across every frequency. A voice older than stars, layered and resonant, filling minds with echoes that could not be forgotten. The words were simple, yet terrifying. You were warned. This path is not yours to walk. For the first time, the Empire realized the warning may not have come from humanity alone. Perhaps the humans were not protecting themselves, but shielding the galaxy from something greater. If that were true, then their desperate invasion was not only reckless, it was catastrophic. The Council dismissed the possibility, calling the voice a human trick. But in the ranks of the fleet, fear turned into hysteria. Soldiers whispered of ancient civilizations that had vanished without explanation, of ruins scattered across forgotten worlds, of warnings etched into stone that no one had ever truly understood. What if humanity had uncovered that truth? What if the technology they wielded was not theirs, but a legacy of something beyond comprehension? Still, the Armada pressed on. They found no human colonies, no defenses, only silence. And then, at last, a signal. A faint pulse of energy drew them deeper into the void, toward a star system that did not appear on any chart. There, they found it. A structure so vast it seemed to swallow the horizon. A black ring encircling the star itself, its surface alive with patterns of light that shifted like breathing skin. The scientists aboard the fleet were speechless. This was not human-made. It was older, far older, but the energy readings were identical to those found in human weapons and ships. The truth crashed down like a tidal wave. Humanity had not merely invented something new. They had awakened something ancient, something that had been buried in the darkness of space long before the Empire was born. And then came the twist that shattered everything. The humans appeared, not in fleets, not in armies, but in a single ship that drifted close to the Black Ring. They sent a message, clear and calm. You should not have come. The Council, watching from afar, demanded an immediate strike. The fleet obeyed. Thousands of weapons fired, beams of light tearing across the void. Yet not a single shot reached the human ship. The ring itself came alive, bending reality around it. Energy dissolved, missiles twisted into nothing, ships shuddered as space folded like paper, and from the shadows of the ring, new shapes emerged. Not human, not empire, something else. They were vast, formless, shifting like silhouettes of light and shadow. Their presence pressed against every mind, a weight so heavy it left soldiers gasping. They spoke not with words, but with a force that bypassed language. A warning, a judgment. The humans were not your enemy. They were your shield. Panic tore through the fleet. Some ships broke formation and fled, others fired blindly, but nothing they did mattered. The strange entities ignored them, turning instead toward the human ship, and then, shockingly, they did not attack. They bowed. The formless giants bent in silent reverence as though acknowledging humanity as kin, or perhaps successors. This revelation shook the galaxy to its core. The Empire's fleets were paralyzed, caught between fear of the unknown and the dawning horror that their arrogance had provoked something they could not possibly fight. Humanity had not been building weapons of war for conquest. They had been preparing for this. They had discovered the remnants of an ancient power and forged an alliance with it. The Council raged in denial. They screamed that it was all a trick, that the humans had enslaved these beings, that the Empire could still win. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had stepped into a role no one else dared claim. They were no longer the prey of the galaxy. They had become its gatekeepers. Yet even this was not the end. For as the fleets stared into the abyss, one final message spread across the stars, broadcast from the human ship itself. Not a warning this time, but a declaration. You thought this was about war. You thought this was about power. It is not. What comes next will decide everything, for all of us. The Empire's fleet, already fractured, teetered on the edge of collapse. Commanders begged for retreat. Soldiers mutinied. Some ships even turned their weapons on the Council's loyalists, refusing to sacrifice themselves to pride. The Empire itself began to fracture as fear spread like wildfire. Colonies declared independence, rebellions ignited, and whispers of humanity's role as the guardians of a new age grew louder. But the humans did not move. They stood silent at the center of it all, watching as the galaxy unraveled, their true purpose still hidden. Were they protectors, conquerors, or merely the inheritors of a duty no one else could bear? The tension climbed higher with every passing moment. The ring pulsed brighter, the entities loomed closer, the Empire's fleets trembled on the edge of annihilation. And in that unbearable silence, one truth became clear. The galaxy was no longer the same. The balance of power had shattered. The unknown was awake, and the humans, once dismissed as weak and insignificant, now stood at the center of a storm that could consume everything. The black ring trembled, as if the star it encircled had come alive. Lines of light streaked across its vast frame, each pulse sending ripples through space that bent gravity itself. Every ship in the Empire's armada felt it. Systems flickered, hulls groaned, and crews clung to the edge of panic. The Council shouted over the chaos, demanding the fleet stand firm, but their voices carried no conviction anymore. The truth pressed on every soldier's mind. They weren't facing humanity's weapons. They were standing at the doorstep of something older than their civilization, something humanity had chosen not to unleash until forced. The lone human ship drifted in the void, small against the colossal ring and the towering beings of shadow and light that surrounded it. Yet, it commanded more presence than the entire Empire's fleet. Its calm silence seemed deliberate, as though waiting for the galaxy itself to understand what was about to unfold. Then, at last, the humans spoke again, their voice steady, without arrogance. This was never a war you could win. It was a choice you were meant to make. The Council, blind in its pride, screamed back across the channels. They accused humanity of manipulation, of lies, of summoning monsters to enslave the galaxy. But even as they spoke, the fleets beneath their command crumbled. Ships broke formation. Captains silenced the Council's orders and turned their weapons away. Fear no longer chained them to the Empire's will. The people had seen too much. They could not unsee humanity standing at the heart of the unknown, acknowledged by beings that defied reason. The black ring's glow reached its peak, and in that blinding light, the truth revealed itself. It was not a weapon, not a shield, but a gateway. Through its center, the void peeled open, revealing not more stars, but a darkness so vast it seemed to breathe. From within, echoes of entire civilizations long vanished whispered across every mind. The shadows and light forms bowed once more toward the humans, and suddenly, the pieces fell together. Humanity had not awakened these entities. They had been chosen by them, bound to a responsibility larger than survival, and then the twist came. For just as the galaxy began to accept that humanity was the shield, the ring pulsed again, this time with a new signal. It was not directed at the Empire, it was directed at the humans. A voice older than time itself, one that made even the light forms flinch, spoke into the silence. "You carry our legacy, but you are not yet ready." The galaxy froze. Even the humans' calm facade shifted, their silence no longer one of control, but of realization. They were not the masters of this power. They were still students standing at the edge of something incomprehensible. The entities surrounding the ring were guardians, but not ultimate ones. Something beyond them waited in that darkness, watching, judging. Humanity had opened the gate, but now they stood exposed before something they had not fully understood. The Council seized upon the hesitation, shouting that this proved humanity was weak, unworthy, deceivers pretending to be gods. But their words no longer inspired fear. If anything, they sounded desperate, clinging to a world already slipping away. The fleets ignored them. The soldiers watched, not the council, not their commanders, but the humans standing small yet unyielding before forces that dwarfed them. And then humanity made its choice. They did not bow to the voice. They did not retreat from the gate. Their ship moved forward into the heart of the Black Ring. As it crossed the threshold, the entire armada braced, waiting for destruction. Instead, something else happened. The darkness inside the ring shifted, its vastness reshaping. For a moment, everyone saw fragments of what lay beyond, endless galaxies, civilizations that had risen and fallen, forces that had consumed entire empires like dust. And within that endless tide, humanity stood, unbroken, carrying the spark of defiance no ancient power could extinguish. The voice spoke again, but this time it was quieter, almost contemplative. You are reckless, dangerous, but perhaps necessary. The gateway dimmed, its vast presence folding back into silence. The entities of shadow and light dispersed into the void, leaving only echoes in their wake. The human ship emerged once more, scarred but intact, its calm signal spreading across every frequency. The test is over. What comes next belongs to all of us. The Empire's fleets broke then, not in destruction, but in surrender. Thousands of ships shut down their weapons, lowering their banners. Commanders swore allegiance not to the Council, but to survival alongside humanity. Worlds that had once mocked or feared the humans now turned toward them, desperate to stand with the one species that had faced the abyss and refused to kneel. The Council raged, but their power evaporated. Without fleets, without loyalty, they were voices lost in the void. Their empire, once thought eternal, dissolved in days. And at the center of it all, humanity did not seize thrones or demand submission. They did something far more terrifying. They offered choice. To every world, they sent the same message: stand with us or stand apart. But know this, we will never run from what waits in the dark, and neither should you. It was a resolution, but not an ending. The war had not ended with conquest or destruction, but with revelation. The galaxy now understood that its greatest threat was not empire or rebellion, but the shadow beyond the stars. Humanity had stood at that threshold, survived its gaze, and been acknowledged as necessary. That word alone carried more weight than victory. But the final twist lingered, unspoken yet undeniable. Humanity had not fully won. They had been spared. For reasons unknown, the ancient voice had allowed them to live, had allowed the galaxy to endure. But it had not promised safety forever. The gate remained, its vast frame still circling the star, silent but awake. And somewhere beyond it, something far greater than shadows or light waited, patient and watching. The galaxy celebrated humanity as saviors, but the humans themselves knew the truth. The test had only begun. What lay beyond the gate would come again, and when it did, it would not test worthiness. It would demand survival. As the human ship returned from the ring, the final message echoed not from their mouths, but in the silence they left behind. The war was over, but the storm had only just begun. The galaxy would remember the silence that followed. No weapons, no thunder of collapsing ships, no fire across the stars, only quiet. For the first time in centuries, the void was not filled with the roar of empire fleets or the echoes of rebellion. Instead, there was stillness, the kind that forced every world, every leader, every soul to look inward. Humanity had stood at the gate, returned alive, and in that act alone shifted the course of history. The Empire's Council tried to cling to what was left of their power. They shouted over their channels, demanded loyalty, and threatened punishment for disobedience. But their words fell into empty air. Their fleets had already turned away, their worlds no longer listening. The Empire had always ruled by fear, but now that fear had found a new direction. It was not terror of the Council, but awe of humanity. Those strange people from a small blue planet who had faced the unimaginable and survived. The Council's grip dissolved not in flames, but in irrelevance. Their once mighty voices became whispers carried by no one. On the ground, across colonies and cities under Empire rule, people began to breathe in a way they had forgotten was possible. Soldiers removed the emblems of a fading regime. Merchants opened routes they once feared to travel. Refugees, scattered across the stars, turned their eyes toward Earth with a question on their lips. What now? The humans themselves gave no easy answer. They did not declare themselves rulers, nor did they seek to take the Empire's throne. Instead, they sent a message, simple, steady, and impossible to ignore. We are not here to conquer. We are here to endure. You may stand with us or apart, but the darkness waits for all of us. Alone, you will fall. Together, we may survive. That choice unsettled many. For some, it was relief, a chance to stand beside a people who had faced what no one else dared. For others, it was fear. Humanity had proven not just powerful, but unpredictable. How could anyone trust a species that carried both defiance and humility in equal measure? Yet even in doubt, there was respect. No one could deny what they had witnessed. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy shifted in ways no historian could have predicted. Worlds long silenced by Empire oppression began to speak openly. Small alliances formed, hesitant but hopeful, weaving together networks of trade and defense. Where once the Empire had ruled with control, now humanity inspired with example. They did not send fleets to enforce their will. They sent envoys, builders, teachers. And when questioned about the Black Ring, the humans gave only a single warning. It is not a weapon. It is a door. And doors do not stay closed forever. That truth lingered heavier than any Empire law. Every world now knew the galaxy was not alone. Beyond the stars lay something greater, something ancient, something that had judged humanity as necessary but not yet ready. The uncertainty became both fear and motivation. Fleets began to rebuild, but not in preparation for war against one another. This time, ships were forged for survival against whatever might one day step through that gate. Humanity had changed the very definition of power. Amid this transformation, the humans themselves did not remain untouched. They had carried victory, but also responsibility. In hushed councils and hidden chambers, they debated what it meant to be chosen, what it meant to be seen by a voice older than time itself. They knew the galaxy now looked to them, but they also knew the weight of expectation could crush as easily as it could inspire. And so, they walked carefully, refusing to become the tyrants they had once despised. For the soldiers of the Empire who had once sworn oaths to the Council, the shift was most personal. Many feared execution, exile, or retribution. Instead, they found something different. Humanity welcomed them, not as enemies, but as allies. Forgiveness was offered not as weakness, but as strength. And in that, former enemies began to see something they had never seen under Empire rule. A chance to belong to something greater than fear. The galaxy's storytellers began to weave tales of the moment the Black Ring awoke, of the shadow and light beings bowing to humans, of the voice that shook stars. They called it the Day of Judgment, the Turning, the Gates Awakening. But no matter the name, the lesson was the same. Power was no longer measured by fleets or weapons, but by will, the will to face the unimaginable and not kneel. Humanity had become the symbol of that will. And yet, even as peace began to grow in fragile steps, the shadow of the gate lingered. No one forgot the voice that had spoken, warning that humanity was not yet ready. No one forgot the vast darkness beyond, waiting, watching. The galaxy could celebrate its new alliances, could marvel at the downfall of an empire, but beneath it all ran a current of unease. The test had been survived, but the true trial had not yet come. For humanity, this was both burden and promise. They had proven themselves before the stars, but in doing so had tied their destiny to every world around them. No longer could they be dismissed as primitives, no longer ignored as latecomers to the galactic stage. They were now at its center, not because they had demanded it, but because the galaxy itself had no other choice. In the quiet that followed, as the council faded and the new alliances grew, one truth became clear. The story was not about victory, it was about survival. Humanity had shown what survival meant, not just clinging to life, but standing unyielding when even the void threatened to erase everything. They had carried not just themselves through the storm, but the hope of countless others. And so the galaxy turned, forever changed. The Empire's banners no longer flew. The black ring drifted silently, a reminder and a warning. The humans, once overlooked, now walked among the stars as equals, their every step echoing louder than any Empire decree. The people of a single blue planet had stood before the unimaginable and endured. But in every whispered story, in every song sung on distant worlds, one question remained. When the darkness comes again, and it will, who will stand at the gate? The galaxy knew the answer already. Humanity would. Because if there was one thing the universe had learned, it was this. Humanity was not just powerful, not just defiant. They were necessary, and in that necessity lay the final reflection. Empires rise and fall. Powers shift. Alliances change. But as long as there are stars to light the void, as long as there are unknowns waiting in the dark, there will be those willing to face them. And at the heart of it all, carrying both the fire of defiance and the hope of survival, would be the humans. That was their legacy, not conquest, not dominion, survival against the unimaginable. And in that survival, the galaxy found its future.